So this becomes my cross hatching. And for a crisscross, I just again go over it in the third angle. Meaning 1, 2, and this is the third. But they are not so far. They are very close to each other. So it's mostly like your knitted kind of a look, wherein the baskets are knitted together, and you have your what do you say, the woolen knit and everything. Okay. Okay. The fourth common one. So right now I'm telling you all the main common ones. Okay. The fourth common one is stippling. Yes, stippling is dot 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 dot. Now with this, so let's say if I draw a circle or a square, whatever, you just keep your pencil absolutely 90 degree. Okay? And you keep on going dots. Okay? Now the closeness of the dots and how far they are defines the shading in that particular object. If the dots are very close to each other, so obviously that portion will look darker than the area where your shading is far, where the dots are far off. Okay, so that helps you justify that where you want dark area, where you want light area. So if I go very close, and remember you have to lift your hand every time. You cannot go together, because if you go together it will form a line. That becomes rendering. That is very close to rendering technique. Okay, so every dot has to be done individually. Every dot is done individually.
What is it called?
Stippling. Stippling. So see, half the bottom part I have done far, the upper part I have done little close. Okay, and to show that okay, that part is really has got too much of shading, you can keep on working on an area again and again and again. Okay, so these are the 4 basic techniques. The 5th one would be scumbling, which is the younger brother of scribbling. Scribbling is done like this. Yeah, scribbling is done like this, right? Scumbling is
small piece.
absolutely, it is small piece. So it just goes like this.
Can't see anything.
Yeah, because it is very lightly done. Now, what happens is, we go light. Now when we have to make it dark, we rework on it. We keep shading on it again and again and again. If it's very dark, then you apply more pressure and you make it dark. This is generally used for hedges, for bushes, for tree where you want to show too much of dark. Sometimes even where you just want to show random shading. In fact, there are complete artwork made with stippling, with hatching and with scumbling method.
Crisscrossing and stippling.
Crisscross is a part of cross hatching. Yeah.
When will we use stippling?
Those are used depending on where. So stippling is another form. See, it all depends on which kind of work you are doing. So there are times when I have done my complete work with stippling. So see, this is how you can create the light and dark. Okay? Yes, please. These 5 are the basic shading techniques. Okay? And you have to understand by looking at the surface or whichever you become comfortable with, and we use the shading technique. Mostly which is used is the smudging, and the hatching is used too much. Scumbling is also used at times. Stippling is something that we generally people just work out on their complete artwork with stippling. Okay? Sometimes, especially when you're making rocks and all, stippling is applied over there.
You have thought you dip it in paint and you did it.
See, these techniques are absolutely same whether you are working with pencil, whether you are working with oil pastels, color pencils, painting, anything. They all go same. The techniques don't change. Okay, the shading techniques remains the same. The blending techniques remains the same. Only the medium keeps changing. Alright. Okay. Now, your shading differs as your hold of pencil differs. Now, if I have a, let's say a small, I'm just making a small pyramid square. Now, if I'll just use 6B over here. Alright, so now let's understand the techniques of different way of holding. So what happens when we hold in different way, how the shading differs. Now this is the underpalm hold. Now in this, when you shade and when you're holding it very loose, it comes like this. And the moment you make it dark, it becomes like this.
Ma'am, which pencil?
I am using 6B right now. Okay?
Ma'am, should I copy all this?
No, not right now, later on. Okay? Now let's say if I have to get these corners marked. That time, obviously I'll go with the normal pencil hold technique. And
Yes, ma'am.
we just go in the smudging strokes. So generally for smudging strokes, we use the normal pencil hold. Okay? Now always remember, we never make a line like this for the outline corners and all. We always go in the shading way to get an outline. We kind of just blend the corners. We blend the borders. Because it's easy to always blend your corners.
To make it darker, ma'am.
To make it darker or to just get your borders correct.
Okay, ma'am.
Two things. One is to make it darker. Second is to make it broader. Like a proper border. See, if I go like this, like a line. Okay, and if I try to blend this doesn't blend. And if you guys also try out and if you will try this, you will see your pencil will be getting stuck over here because this makes a kind of a mark over here, which comes mostly on the back side of my page. Okay, but if I have done a line like this, which I did over here before, and then if I try to blend with this, it is easy. My pencil moves smoothly. Right? Now, let's say I make what a beautiful oval I have made. Okay? And these are the generally in the round kind of an object, you can always try and use the cross hatching technique. So what we do is, we start from here, let's say. I'm assuming that this part is my dark. I'm right now not going with the light source and all. Let us assume that this part is the darkest part. Okay, so I can always make it more gradient and make it more dark just by adding cross hatching to it. Because see, in cross hatching, what is happening? On a line, you are redoing a line. And since it's crossing each other, so the place wherever it is crossing, it's becoming darker. Right? Because even if you cross your fingers, so wherever the fingers will be crossing, that part will have the cast shadow of it. So it's a basic logical technique. It's a very simple thing. So it becomes darker. So see, if I shade here just with the hatching way. Let me use the 6B in full its strength. Okay, and I make cross hatching here. So which one appears to be more darker, the hatching or the cross hatching?
Cross hatching.
Cross hatching, yes. Cross hatching appears to be darker because it has got a double line crossover, because it's got like two lines, it's going like this, it's going like this. Okay, so these are the basic ways you need to know. Now sometimes when you want a double kind of a line, like a thicker line, okay, but in a shaded way, that time you don't go like this and then you don't shade underneath. No, what you do is you hold your pencil like this in the underpalm position and you make a line here. Okay, now even if I have to make a single line, you get that shading effect automatically. Isn't it? But if I do this and then if I try to shade, I cannot get this effect. For this kind of an impact, I have to hold it in my underpalm position and I have to go like this. So automatically where the lead was touching the most, that becomes darker, and then we have a gradual fading off in this part. Right? Understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Now, different it is. Okay, so let us understand how different it is when we shade, when we try to spread them. Okay, so you all can try this with a paper also and with your fingers. So if I try to smudge 2B, I'm going to use my index finger. Look at the smudging, how much it is happening for 2B, 3B, sorry, HB, this was HB, this is 2B, this is 3B, 4B, 6B, and then this is your 8B. So if you see, slowly even the smudging becomes darker. Now if I use my 8B with full darkness, okay, maximum that 8B can get. Okay, and if I keep on redoing on it, and then if I spread, it only gets smoother. Okay, and a slight darkness comes in this portion. That has happened for all. But if I try to spread the lighter ones, it actually doesn't spread much. It only becomes smooth where we had used the pencil. Nothing else happens. We can hardly see anything over here. But for these, it is easier. So remember, when you have to spread your shading, when you have to spread the colors that you've done, this also implies for colors, okay? You make sure that it is done on the darker, because it is the darker regions that will gradually spread and become lighter. Right? Because the lighter cannot become further light.
Yes.
Light you can't make further light. The best way to make light further light is to erase. Now, sometimes, so let's say I make a round here, okay, and I have really shaded over here dark. Now, I want one part in this place to be light. And like, like really light, like there should not be any shading. Okay, that is the time you use your eraser. Try to use the pointed part of the eraser and not the blunt part. And if you don't have a pointed part, cut your eraser. Okay, maybe you can take help of your elders. For cutting and all, please. And you get the pointed part. Right? Now from one point, you start erasing in that place.
Yes, ma'am.
And you make sure that you concentrate in just that part. So you can see a spot which is like absolutely white in that. So generally the bounce light value that we have to show, we can often show it with this. Okay. Now if I would have done the same thing with the blunt side, let me show it to you what would have happened. Because let us understand that why we are not supposed to use the blunt side. Now in the blunt side, if I would have done, more or less everything gets erased. So if you have a very bigger region, where you need to bring that white effect, then maybe you can use the blunt side. But otherwise it is always advisable to use the pointed side. And if you don't have the pointed side, then of course go with it. Now if you want a very thin line, so the cut one, the part that I cut from my eraser, I can just use the thin portion of that and erase it. So this gives me a thinner line. Thinner you are able to cut, thinner you get. Okay? So these are few things that you should know. Now there is one more way, there is one more place where sometimes we don't want our shading to be erased, but we want in some portions it to be lighter. So let me go back to the page of the hatching one where we had done. Now let's say I want this part or this part to become slightly lighter, but I don't want it to be erased. Okay? That time we use a very simple word, and the technique has been named behind that simple word, that is called dabbing. Okay? It's called dabbing. I don't know whether it's a double B or a single B. So what you do, you don't erase. Okay? Make sure that your eraser is more or less clean. What you do, you just dab on top of it. You just dab. You just press it and you just dab. Just like stippling, instead of ta-ta-ta-ta-ta continuously, you're just going little. You're touching here, you're pressing. You're touching here, you're pressing. And if you want to spread it, your eraser has more or less become black in this part.
Yes, ma'am.
So you can just very lightly take your erasers, that darkness, and you can use it. So see, we did not erase, yet we got a light effect.